Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Bleed. It's September 3rd, and it's everyone's favorite day, New Comic Day. But we're not here to talk about new comics today. We're here to talk about old comics that are awesome. And I'm excited about this one because I have awesome guests with me, and we're talking about an awesome book. It was my pick. This week we're reading Atomic Robo, Volume 1, The Fighting Scientists of Tesladyne. And it's a good book. But before we get into that, I'm going to introduce everyone. As always, my cohort David Desanayaki. He is with us. I always fuck his name up. I'm sorry, everyone.
Dissanayaka. David Dissanayaka.
You would think I didn't.
No worries. Yeah, nobody can pronounce this name right. It took me the first 10 years of my life to figure it out.
But so yeah, he's joining me, and also with us is James Asmus, the writer of Quantum and Woody. We're talking about an awesome Delinquents. Okay. Yes. This week we're reading Atomic Robo, Volume 1, The Fighting.
I got a crazy echo chamber going for a second. I think I had two windows open as an audience for this. So the time delay just kicked in. Sorry.
No worries.
No worries. I was kind of thrown off for a second. Is someone talking over me? Yeah, James is the writer of the Delinquents and Quantum and Woody, which was nominated for a ton of Harveys.
All the Harveys.
Yeah, take that, Matt Fraction.
Matt Fraction will take those awards, actually.
Yeah. And also joining us is Omar Spahi. He is the CEO of OSSM Comics, and he's the writer of a few of their comics, including Thaniel and Xenoglyphs. Hi, Omar.
Hey, guys. Thank you.
What's up?
Of course. So before we get started, I'm going to ask these two what they're working on. So, James, the first issue of the Delinquents came out, and for you do a pretty good job of pitching getting the premise out there. So why don't you tell us what the Delinquents is about at its core?
So the Delinquents is the kind of crazy adventure team-up book between Valiant's two mismatched buddy humor characters, Archer and Armstrong, and the book I've been writing, Quantum and Woody. And in this particular instance, they each have half of a treasure map tattooed on a dead hobo's butt cheeks. And they are each after the lost and mysterious treasure of the hobos. And, hijinks will ensue for 4 issues. And it's written so that if you've never read Quantum and Woody or Archer and Armstrong, this is a pretty... it's totally accessible. We give you everything you need to know, and you can jump right into it. So yeah, I hope people give it a try. If you've heard things about Quantum and Woody or Archer and Armstrong, you're interested in checking it out, this is the book for you. And Kano is our artist who had previously done an arc with me on Quantum and Woody and did some of Charles Soule's Swamp Thing. And he is a really crazy, brilliant artist. Does really atypical layouts, really fantastic character work. It's super dynamic. So, whatever you think of me, you should come and check out his work. So, yeah.
Sweet. And now, are you co-writing this with Fred Van Lente?
Yeah, we plotted it together, and then I write a script, and then Fred comes in and rejiggers whatever he sees fit, as he is invited and encouraged to. Yeah, and we just bat stuff around. So I end up doing probably like 80% of the script, but it's off a plot we did together. And the ass map concept was his, and it's a brilliant bit of giving people a real sense of where we're at, like, right away. Pretty perfect.
Nice. Now, do you have any other... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to ask, because Kano has this... I don't know if... Because I only read the first few issues of Archer and Armstrong, but and I don't know if that the hobo symbology is something that comes from over there, but I know it's not something that has come up in Quantum and Woody.
Well, so the thing is, it's the hobo code, which is a big part of this and part of the the adventure they have around the country. But that's actually a real thing. The hobo code was something in the Depression that actual hobos would leave for each other as a way to say, like, this is a safe place to hop a train. Like, come here and tell these people a sob story, and they'll give you food. Like, there were all these little codes they left for each other. So when we were looking at putting together, something that fused the DNA of our two books, Archer and Armstrong was all about unearthing these like conspiracy theories and secret societies. And I had ended up doing running bits about homeless characters, side characters in my book, and Woody had been homeless for a while. So we just kind of landed on realizing that the actual history of Hobo Code would make an interesting launch point.
Yeah, it's a great.
That's an awesome idea.
Yeah. So, all right. One last thing I wanted to ask you was a couple weeks ago when we last talked, you were you had just met with Jim Festante, your co-writer of The End Times of Bram and Ben, and I was just wondering if I know it's still early, but have you guys worked anything out more?
Well, yeah. So we just I just pitched the concept to one publisher, and we're waiting to hear back. And I'm about to talk to another one. I'm not so chaste a girl that I won't court multiple suitors at the same time. So we'll see where it ends up. But it's still too early for me to say much about it right now, other than it's going to be what Jim and I love is comedy based on really flawed, fully realized characters, really distinct, and we found a way to do that in kind of a big sci-fi epic that at the same time like undermines its own grandeur with how messed up and uniquely flawed these characters are. So it would be like a big buffet for us to feed at. So it could go for a long time if we strike it right. So I'm thrilled, and I hope to be able to talk about it more soon, but it's still a little too early for me to say much.
Oh, fair enough.
Well,
any other projects coming out from you?
Well, yes, they just announced I am doing part of a Quantum and Woody one-shots in December, so that's the official announcement that we are coming back with more Quantum and Woody after the Delinquents. And that's the tip of the iceberg. There will be more announcements coming out soon, but it's so much fun. We are having a lot of fun doing this. And I'm working on one or two other things for Valiant right now that I don't think we're going to be able to announce this weekend at Baltimore, but it will probably be, at least one of them I think will be coming out soon because the wheels are already spinning pretty far on it. But I think I'm probably out of turn to say much. I will tease that it's characters you have already seen in the Valiant universe, but we will be taking a more we'll be sliding a bit sideways with the premise and going a little bit more gonzo and a little bit bigger and weirder with it.
Oh, intriguing, sir.
I hope it's like Harbinger Academy or something like that. Something.
I
will see what it is.
I'll face myself no matter what you say right now.
All right, Omar, what are you guys working on? I know you guys have a new comic that's coming out right now that your partner Psych Donnelly's doing.
Yeah, Seek's actually working on Monomyth right now, and it's coming out through local comic stores. It's only a 3-part miniseries. So it's not that big of a commitment where you're just picking up a book and you're like, when will this end? It's only 3 issues from start to finish. Seek's done an amazing job with it. It's kind of the ultimate Marvel What If story because Seek always grew up and was reading Marvel What If, and Marvel What If Namor was actually a fish, and so this is the ultimate What If story, and it takes place in in the biblical world. What if Lucifer and Michael switch places. So Lucifer is actually this female who is trying to stop Adam and Eve from eating the apple, and Michael is this fallen angel that's trying to take over the Garden of Eden. So on this, humans never know sin, they never know anything evil, they never know anything like that, and it's actually our main character is this kid Enoch, and Enoch is this kind of like angsty teenager kid. He's like the first kid who kind of is failing and is kind of having trouble in Eden, and he's about to be banished into out of Eden when Michael attacks. So that's kind of the basic story of it.
Interesting. Well, now you've written a few books for your company yourself. There's Thaniel.
Oh shit!
Thank you.
Thaniel, yeah. Which Thaniel, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one of your more well-known books, right? Am I?
All 4 issues. He's on point.
Oh, yeah. I got them all.
I love it, man. Thank you. I really appreciate it. That's awesome.
So, yeah. For as far as Thaniel goes, and being on the business end of OSSM Comics, what do you enjoy doing more? Do you enjoy the creative process or the business process?
Honestly, for me, it's the creative process is a lot more fun. The business process is a lot more tedious, and there's a lot more behind the scenes of pushing this, pulling this, making sure everything gets done on time, making sure the book gets out there, that people know about the book, so people are picking it up. And the business side, actually getting to write, get to develop these characters, these concepts is something that's really fun.
Nice. Are you guys listed in Diamond?
Yeah, we're listed in Diamond. We're going through all comic book stores in North America, and I think in like the UK and Australia and everywhere Diamond sells to. So we're everywhere.
Can I ask you a question to Omar?
Yeah.
No.
Omar, what's your like dream vision for the company? Like, what kind of what are you hoping to forge forward into becoming?
I mean, in a full-fledged answer, I think that we want to start in making comic books, and hopefully we want to begin to develop these IPs into different mediums, through video games, through television, through animated series, different things we're going to try to work on and try to get that company on like more globalized scale. I feel like comic books is a great starting point, and that's where my love is. My passion has always been with comic books, but I feel like to grow the audience and to get people really into it, it has to kind of evolve into other medias, other things, and kind of get out there. And that's just my business side talking. But I think that it's something that's really, really interesting to see that how the comic book world works and how the other media in the world works and how they kind of come together. So I'm trying to bridge that gap and try to take things from one medium and take them to another. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Cool. Interesting. Do you have any plans at this juncture of like bringing these things into another medium?
We have lots and lots of plans for a lot of projects, but we're working on them one thing at a time. We have some big announcements coming up, hopefully. That are really going to hopefully change the face of Awesome and hopefully just catapult it into that next stratosphere of hopefully becoming a major comic book publisher in 2015.
Sweet. That's exciting, man. Congratulations.
Yeah. Ambitious plans. Awesome. Look forward to reading more of their stuff. Okay, so I guess we should get right down into it. We could talk about Atomic Robo. This is volume 1 of a series that is still going. It's a series of miniseries coming out, and right now they're coming out with a series called Knights of the Golden Circle, and it's a story of Atomic Robo in the 18th century. But we're not reading that one. We're reading Fighting Scientists at Tesladyne, volume 1, and this comic was the first Atomic Robo series to come out. And it's amazing. I mean, it's just so much fun. It's such a funny comic. It's adventurous. It bounces around in time, and it goes through all these different aspects of adventure storytelling. And I really enjoyed this book. I picked it because I really wanted to see what David thought of it as a person who I know him and I don't really have the same sensibilities, And then also, I wanted to find out what James thought, because he's a really great humor writer, and if there's anything about this book that's notable, it's how funny it is. So I'm excited to...
I've been a fan of this book for a long time, so I was really happy to have this as a reason to revisit the first one in particular.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Well, why don't you go into and tell me about when you first started reading Atomic Robo, and why you enjoy it.
Weirdly, the first time that I read it was... Did I just fall out of this? What happened?
No, you're here.
Oh, okay. I just suddenly got a weird Bleeding Cool logo on the thing.
Sorry.
When digital comics apps were just launching, there were a couple at the same time as Comixology. There was like Comics Plus or something. And Atomic Robo was like one of their featured ones. I just gave it a try because it was highly rated and loved it. And then just kept buying more and more. I've mostly read the series digitally, but I've tried to get my hands on free comic book day ones to give. My wife is a special ed teacher, and she does different like incentive programs in her classroom. So I try to load her up with comic books that are kind of kid appropriate.
That's awesome.
And Robo has always been one of my favorite ones to get copies of to slip in there. Because, like you said, I think it's funny. I think it's smart. But it doesn't become sort of alienating in its intelligence, but it doesn't talk down to the audience either. I think they really balance a lot of things that are hard to do in this book, and they make it look easy, and it's a fun, super rockin' book that I think is just delightful. I think if you like comics, this is like what we think of in comics. It's like escapist, but still pretty smart. It's got style. It's got humor without going overboard. Yeah, I think it's an all-around tremendous, tremendous book.
Awesome. David, what about you? Your initial thoughts upon reading it?
I really liked it. I had heard about Atomic Robo for a long time, actually, but I never actually picked it up to read it. I read it all today, as a matter of fact, on my commute to work on the Metro here in San Francisco. It's about a half hour there and a half hour back. And yeah, I loved it. It kind of reminded me, like, a little bit, almost of Hellboy, in its like structure, and also the art style, which I thought was really interesting. It's really lighthearted and very witty, and like you said, James, it's got that sort of like escapism, like really well-crafted escapism aspect to it, but at the same time, it's fun but really witty and intelligent at the same time, but like not so much where it's like really sort of like a burden or like something you really have to dedicate a lot of thought to. And it was really nice for me, actually. I've been like reading a whole bunch of relatively heavy stuff these days. Like I just read this like really intense manga called Nijigahara Holograph. I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard it, but it's just really, really intense. And I've been watching like Twin Peaks, like the David Lynch show, for the first time. And it's just, just these weird headspaces that I've been in. And Atomic Robo was like the perfect thing to sort of like bring me out of like this sort of like deep, weird place of all the, like the media I've been consuming into this like awesome, sort of lighthearted, fun, hilarious book. I like literally cracked up on the train and like disturbed the woman that was sitting next to me on my way back from work today because of this book. And it was great. I'm glad you chose it. At first, I wasn't sure exactly what to think when you made the pick, but I'm all in now. This is great. I want to pick up the rest of the trades.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched up on a good point. You mentioned how he's the most human character in this story, and he's kind of the most normal character of them all, because he's thrown in these grandiose situations and everyone around him is having these ridiculous conversations, and he's the one that's always simplifying things. You talk too much. Come on. Omar, what did you think about it?
I actually haven't read it.
Nice, dude.
Well, you should read it.
I should. I did not get the memo that it was required reading for today. but I'm excited to read it.
Omar didn't do his homework. No, just kidding.
Well, yeah, James will hold it up for you, and
Read it right now. You guys know what I think.
It's super readable, like light on light surfaces, right?
Yep.
you can get through it. It's something that is rewarding on multiple reads, but it's not hard reading at all. It's actually it's just structured. I think each issue is a kind of an individual chapter that tell a bigger tale at the end of the 6 issues that are in this first collection. But each issue is very accessible in and of itself, of being a single told story, a single issue story, and it's really entertaining read. So you gotta, in fact, go get it right now and read while we're talking, and then at least you'll get to issue like 2 by the time we're almost done, and then you can chime in.
Yeah, it was a super quick read too. That like I said, I managed to read it in that small amount of time, and that's really sort of a testament to the skill of the creative team involved. The fact that they built this story that really is actually pretty intricately structured, and it just sort of runs right by. Like I just sort of breezed right through it, and then it wasn't until I was finished I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I read that. And then I sort of flipped back through, and I was like, oh, there are all these little aspects here that I didn't quite. They just sort of breezed by, and it's really nice to see how well they did it. And I was impressed, like I said before, the structure of the series itself, that it takes all of these different stories sort of at different moments in the history of the character and the history of the fictional world, and sort of builds out around that. And that's, I think, what reminded me a little bit of Hellboy. I don't know if you guys read Hellboy at all. But I think it's like a really difficult thing to do, and to like sort of build this long, almost like century-long history of a character, and then paint all of these little pictures of like different snapshots at different times in the character's life, and still have it all sort of like be relevant to each other, relevant to the character, relevant to the world. And I can definitely see that Mignola influence on Atomic Robo for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
It's I think too something like I sort of think it's a really deceptive, like it seems, you're right to say it's a really easy read, but there's like this really stealth secret sophistication and complexity to that they are telling a story across multiple timelines. I think just purely the sort of sincere science of it that they kind of slip in places, and as the series goes forward, they do lock into slightly more linear, complicated stories. But I think it still always ends up being like a perfect laying down to go to, like when you're unwinding in bed, like before you're ready to go to sleep. It's that kind of a thing. There's a lot of books I can't enjoy the way they're intended while I'm simultaneously trying to shift into my lowest gear, but this is a book that is delightful, and you can get everything out of it. Like it doesn't make you work to enjoy its complexity. It kind of
exactly.
And on the other side, it doesn't hold your hand, and that's kind of why I really liked. Why I really like Quantum and Woody is because it's so loaded, and like this comic, it's so loaded with, but it doesn't hand feed it to you. Most comics, whenever they're talking, like they're like, oh, like what is, like someone sitting at a computer at the base, like this alarm is going off, sir. What does this mean? It's like, no, that's the Helsingard system. The Helsingard alerts us to everything, every threat in the northern hemisphere. We have to alert Atomic Robo. And this, they're like, they just like someone offhandedly mentioned, like Helsingard alarm's going off. Boom, you know what he's talking about, and it doesn't like sit there and explain every little aspect of it all to you. I mean, the first issue alone, the guy has the vril organ, that organ that was stuffed inside of him, and then and it's just so funny. They don't explain what it is, what its power is. He's just super powerful, and he's floating, and he says, "Oh, now that I have the vril organ, I am unstoppable." And Atomic Robo's like, like thanks for telling me your secret plan and your only weakness. Boom. And it's just so it like I said, how he was the most normal person and the most human person in this whole series. It's kind of like they throw these these stock tropes at you in a funny way, and he's just like, you guys are idiots. Like, this is how a logical person, a man of science, deals with it, you know. And
yeah, I really liked how they play the tropes. You know, it's very almost self-aware in that sense. It's like, you know, they know that you know that what's coming.
But
you know,
it
like,
doesn't descend into just like nerdy self-referential. Like it stays a story in a way that if I gave this to someone who wasn't super versed in genre tropes, they could just enjoy the story in front of them. It's not this like navel-gazing thing that you know, knowing nerd fiction can sometimes fall into this Ouroboros thing where it becomes inaccessible to anyone else.
Yeah, and it doesn't. It treads lightly, and I like that it does that because it makes it's like it's almost a part of Atomic Robo's character, and he's been living for so long, and that's why you were talking about how the later volumes become more linear, and I think that this is the best primer for. I mean, it's volume 1, so of course, and so volume 1 is like a taste of everything that you're going to get in the future. It's just a really good kind of just here's a complete story, but here's also a snapshot of him through time and how he's been a little bit different and how I mean I just love that second issue. It's so I thought that was one of the best issues of the whole thing where he's reminiscing to the reporters about his time on Earth and then he's remembering his bailing his buddy out or his buddy bailing him out and getting that letter about his buddy now passing away in the present time, and it just ends on that perfect line where he says, like, what the hardest part about being this old is that I do a great Jack Benny, but no one gets it,
Oh yeah. And that's a great example of what you're talking about his humanity is they so there's an efficiency in this book that I think is amazing. Brian Clevinger is the writer, right?
Yeah.
And he can, in 2 lines, just speak volumes about the character, the narrative, and make you laugh with just the right 2 sentences. I'm deeply envious because as much as we work to get comedy in Quantum and Woody, I can't seem to keep it in under like 300 words a page. So.
I think also that goes to the talent of the artist Scott Wegener. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I'm like 0 for 3 on names today. So, but Scott, I mean, his artwork is so expressive. I mean, Atomic Robo's design itself is just I wanted to mention that. The character,
yeah, it's really well done.
The way, he's so iconic. Those big blue eyes and. Going back and reading it, that first part you don't really see him. You see his eyes, you see the silhouette, and then the bomb drops or the casing drops, and he kicks out of it, and those eyes glow. And it's such a good panel, and it makes me. I need to go get that trade that you have because I like James have it all on. I have it all on Comixology, and it's. I would like the page turn. I want to flip the page and see. It makes me long for that because so that's why I started collecting them. Luckily, my store starts getting them now, and I really like having those physical copies. But any way you can get your hands on this book is worth it. Yeah. Like I was saying about Scott, he's so expressive. Those jokes go well, because I mean a lot of it. I mean, I think some of Robo's funnier moments are in moments of action, where he's kind of like Robo gets smacked across like a field, and he's all like on the other side of the world, and he's like, all right, round 2, and he just like runs back into it, and it's only funny because of that whole thing where he gets like beat the crap kicked out of him and thrown halfway across the globe, and all of a sudden he's ready for more, and even though that doesn't happen, but that's kind of I just think they're so in sync. They work so well together.
Well, there's he has a real cartoonist sensibility in terms of the way he draws his figures, the way he draws motion. Like he's able to angle and structure his characters in the panel in such a way that you feel the fall and the hit, like you feel so much of the motion and impact and energy and personality all in one sort of simplified gesture. And I think that is like truly a cartoonist in the sort of Saturday, Sunday paper kind of sense of the word quality that I think a lot of even great comic book artists don't have, and they have to show you these they have such rigid kind of static images that even if they look great, they lose a fluidity, so they need the extra beats to make you feel the whole motion. And I think Scott's really able to tell you so much of a story of motion in one panel. It's impressive.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. He does like it kind of just in terms of his style, like he has that cartoonist aspect, like you said. But his figure drawing and the way that he also designs sort of like the backgrounds and the sort of like the locations that they're set in reminds me again a lot of Mignola, as well as a little bit of like Ryan Ottley at the same time from Invincible. I don't know if either of you guys read that book.
I do. Yeah, I think Ryan makes great use of angles to create energy in a way that I think like Trad Moore does that, and I think some of that here in Scott's work as well, where like just by tweaking the kind of angles in the structure of things or the camera angle, like he's just so aware of how to shift lines to create energy. It's something really crazy.
Yeah, you guys are both spot on that. I mean, I was kind of trying to pinpoint it, and it is the cartoonist aspect that I think really drives it. But I mean, the character work, the life that the colors bring to it, the characters, the emotions in the faces, and the way they all look, it kind of reminds me, and I'm not too familiar with it, so maybe that's why it reminds me. It reminds me of manga. It almost has this that manga-like feel to it, and the vividness. And I think I feel that way about Otley's work, and even Tradmore's way. I mean, that's way a lot on a different level. That is something.
Sure. I just meant in that like mechanical aspect of their aesthetic. I don't think anyone would confuse their pages for
no, definitely not.
Having that arrow in their quiver, as an artist.
Oh yeah, the perspective. I mean, his use of like angles, like you said, it's just it's spot on. I really enjoy this book.
So there's something. This is a total different thing, but something that I kept thinking of when I read it. I was introduced to this book as it being an all ages book, and I hear it brought up a lot in the context of all ages material, and particularly when you see it done well. And I will say, I think this is an interesting example in that there's still he still murders the villain at the end, and he calls someone a bastard, and there's jokes about robot pornography. So I simultaneously feel like, is it all ages? But the truth is the spirit of the book is so positive, and it's so aspirational as opposed to some sort of morally bankrupt dystopian thing that you find in so many comics, that I could see why it still would be something that feels fun and encouraging for sort of a younger readership. And it doesn't go too dark, but it definitely plays with some stuff where I was like surprised in rereading it to find this stuff in there and thinking about it. Just in because this thing that I'm working on with Jim Festante, we actually just decided that we just realized that it didn't actually need to be like R-rated, even though that's our kind of natural inclination. And we sort of realized that 90% of the jokes we were excited about and narrative things, we're totally could make it an all ages book, and it's got kind of some younger protagonists. So we were like, oh, maybe we should just do that. And we were thinking about what we would have to cut, and there's a few things that were on the line for us. And so reading some of the things that are in here, I realized, I guess, if you do it with a light enough touch, I think you can get away with a lot, which also made me think about the fact that stuff we loved as kids, or you hear a lot of people my age, I guess I don't really know your ages, but love had an element of subversiveness. Like Transformers the movie says shit, like the old cartoon one that was PG, you know what I mean? And Goonies has all kinds of sort of like sexual references. Monster Squad has this whole thing about whether or not someone's a virgin. Like I think there's room for that in a non-Mickey Mouse world, and I think this is a great example. And yeah, but it does an interesting thing to the question of all ages titles, and I was wondering sort of if that struck you guys that way, or.
Oh man, there's this. I pulled this page up. Look at this panel right here. It's a guy getting shot. Let me see if I can make it brighter without that reflection. There's the guy getting shot in the head, and it's.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty vivid. It's very vivid. And when I'm reading that, I was like, this is all ages, but I mean, I wouldn't give it to my 6-year-old who's also reading regular show comics, which have a whole nother layer of subtext to those. But at least there's no one getting their brains blown out. But if I were someone transitioning and I didn't want my kid to read the current X-Men stuff, or because a lot of the Marvel stuff and DC stuff is a little bit more mature. It's not like I can give this to anyone. And I think I would give this to my teenager, my preteen, to wean him into that kind of the more mature comics, because it feels all ages, but then there are parts, man, that just like.
I'm live reading the first issue, and there's an explosion that goes off. My legs. I'm like, that's not all ages. Like that's
yeah.
Yeah, but that dude loses his legs off panel, so like.
Exactly. But and you don't even know if he loses his legs. It's just my legs. It's a grenade goes off. It's. I think that's the part of the heart behind it and the comedy, and I think that's what makes this comic endearing, is because there are those kinds of gags are what really. Those are what make me chuckle, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there like an age cutoff you think you would have for like when you would actually give this book to somebody, to a kid?
Well, I think I would. I think part of it though is you have to be a certain age, I think, to enjoy it or even to read it really, because as much as it's not overly Claremontian and verbose, it's also not super simplified, so I probably would give it to like a 9-year-old. Yeah. I don't know. I'm bad at gauging this stuff. Like my kid is so young and whiny apparently. But no, I've had multiple parents ask me what age it's okay for their kid to read Quantum of Woody, and I'm like, good. I don't know.
I'm at 6, 7, maybe.
Yeah.
Did you allow him to smoke yet?
Oh, there's a goat. It's adorable. For everyone. Basically, Babe, Pig in the City. No, I'm so bad at that, but I try and talk to people about what the content is and kind of let them decide based on their own kid. But with this, I don't think there's anything super extreme like that. Yeah, that kind of like exposed brain as a guy's shot in the head is probably about as intense as it gets. But but it still looks cartoony, and I had to like look at it like twice to be sure that that's really what I was seeing.
Any other comic, there'd be blood sprayed everywhere on the inside. His head would be exploded,
Yeah, like if this were DC Futures End, like he would have torn the skull itself open and like pulled out the brain, and
eyeball would be still attached to it.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I feel like a 9-year-old's, if they ever played video games,
So I was gonna say, how does my son react to playing Call of Duty? Is he like, I'm gonna murder you, or is he just like, it's a game?
Well, I also think growing up, I think it's a different paradigm that I'm trying to figure out now. Raising kids in the age of the internet, like, you know, we're all trying to be coy about if a kid can hear the word bastard or the phrase robot pornography at, you know, what age. But it's like they have machines in their hand that are like instant every pornography, and
Yep.
you know, like I was telling this woman, I'm like, you know, I don't know if your 10-year-old should really read Quantum and Woody, but for all I know, he's seen Two Girls, One Cup. Like, I don't know what.
Probably has, honestly.
I don't know what your son's real threshold is, so it's hard to say. I know what I could say if this were 1995. Like, you know, a kid probably shouldn't read it till he's like 14.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point. That if we have no frame of reference for this, for growing up in this era, you know, in this era.
Yeah.
Everything that I mean, when I was a kid, my dad had CompuServe dial-up, and you know, there was you had to be dedicated to look anything up on that. You know?
Yeah, like the mind-blowing corruption of our youth was like if HBO was gonna show some boobs.
I know.
Yeah,
That's exactly.
That was like the high watermark. But this is, you know, they have the internet. Like, there's stuff that terrifies me that I see by accident because, you know, I forgot that search term also means something else.
Yeah. That's fair. All right, so
No actual snowball.
Well, I think for me when I gross.
put a link. I'll see. So we kind of talked about that. We pretty much hit most of the points I was going to make, just because everyone kind of touched on the same things. But I thought one of the better aspects of it was how it how we were talking about how it wields a complex story. I think it's pretty awesome how their playground is history as much as it's science. I think that that goes to it's a very talented team. I love historical fictions. I love alternate takes on things like that. I've emailed Jonathan Hickman and said, let me write a spin-off for Manhattan Projects that's all about Marilyn Monroe as an assassin. But he never turns my shit. So anyway, you know. But all the, you know, I just really enjoy Atomic Robo because one of my favorite series that they did was, you know, them Atomic Robo stumbling across this brigade of, they're called the Flying She-Devils. It's a group of women that
have that one, but I was gonna say, yeah, it's future volumes I know get more historical too.
Yeah, and I just really, and as much as this one bounces around time, I really kind of enjoy how his history it's one of the strongest themes throughout the entire 6-issue series. I mean, even when he's bouncing around. When it's bouncing between the story of him and his friend and the reporter and him back, fighting Japanese planes. It also goes to the pyramids and how he deals with this mobile pyramid threat, and that's it's very fantastical, but it's still, you know, it has to do with Egypt and it has to do with technology that they really didn't have access to, but you know, it made it believable in a sense that it wasn't computers that were powering these seemingly sentient pyramids. It was a mechanical machine. Yeah, it was a mechanical machine, and that goes back to the science aspect. But like I said, I really enjoyed how it plays in history.
Mm-hmm. Are you up to date with all the Atomic Robo stuff? Either of you?
I think the last one I had is volume 5. I, in general, have so many books that I am behind on, and Atomic Robo has always been for me like, oh, it's on sale again. Let me buy the next one I don't have. Like,
yep.
That's how they nudge me into finally, like, you know, putting it picking up another one, even though I have all this stuff I haven't read. So I'm sure next time there's a sale, I will grab my She-Devils.
Yeah, that one's really good. They just kind of get. I really enjoy the Free Comic Book Days because Dr. Dinosaur he's such a funny character, and you guys, they don't mention him in the series for quite some time, and then one of the recent volumes that just wrapped up was The Savage Sword of Dr. Dinosaur. And you guys, you should pick up the Free Comic Book Days, just because they're all free on Comixology. You can download them, and you can access them on their website. You can get them pretty much through any digital comics website that are out there. But the Free Comic Book Days are a little bit more absurd than the regular series because Dr. Dinosaur he's a dinosaur. He's a velociraptor that has survived.
And he's constantly lying about everything.
Oh yeah, he's shouting. The lettering itself just for Dr. Dinosaur it's indicative of how crazy this character is and how much he believes his own insanity. You know, he's just the perfect bad guy, but he was always too ridiculous for the main series, and they finally brought him into the main series in one of the later volumes, and it was perfect. And I think that's another aspect of this comic is how I really like how they kept that separate, and they were able to. And Atomic Robo danced between the raindrops of reality and fantasy. And well, these other aspects are just off the wall, batshit crazy, and then finally throw it all together. And James, you would really like that. It's a funny series. You don't need to. I mean, you can read them all.
I saw in re-downloading this. I only just saw that the new one was a Dr. Dinosaur. So I was very tempted to just straight up buy that, even though I would be skipping past stories.
It's worth it. It's good. It's really good.
Now, does it continue to be structured in such a way that like you can kind of get is there an overarching plot that's like unveils itself after a little while, or is it just like little story and little story after little story?
I think there's development, like it fleshes out his backstory and his relationships, and some stuff kind of comes back around or as consequence. But for the most part, each volume is kind of made to pretty much be like, if someone randomly handed you this volume, you could get a full story out of it. Yeah.
That's why I think it's a great adventure series because it's kind of like Indiana Jones in that sense that each installment is supposed to be self-contained, but in that aspect, it's still the same Atomic Robo, and and he is very much the same character throughout it all. You just catch him at different snapshots of his life and a different adventure that he's had, and it really goes to show you not just how he's grown, but why he is the way he is, and you get a lot out of it reading. I've only read the first two volumes, and then from volumes 6, 7, and 8. And then the latest one. So I have like 3, 4, and 5 that I still need to read, and those are ones that I hear are really, really great. But I don't feel like I've missed out on.
I feel like the whole series and the character and the Free Comic Book Days, I feel like everything they do is really mindful that this is designed to be, at least it feels like, a really great book to get people into comics. It feels like it just finds all of these ways to be welcoming and enjoyable if you at any stage. And I think you can see when you read this first miniseries, you could grab issue 4 and it's its own story. It doesn't punish you for not having read 1, 2, and 3. And I know we don't live in a sort of get your comics on a spinner rack at the drugstore when you happen to see them world. But it is true that different comics, I think especially for younger readers or people just trying out the medium, sometimes they do just run into something randomly and try it, or like see it in their friend's bathroom and pick it up when they're taking a long dump or something, I continue to meet people who are like, one of the first comics I ever read was, Gambit 6 or something like that. I'm like, that is super weird. But I still try to write every comic of mine where if you happen to just read this issue, because I will occasionally find a book in the dollar bin, and I had always heard about it or wanted to try it. And I'm like, well, I'll try issue 12 to see if I want to spend money and time trying the other ones. I know it doesn't happen much, but I think with comics, it being so difficult to grab audiences, why make any book? Why introduce anything that would alienate people or make them be like, oh, I give up. I guess this isn't for me.
I mean,
yeah.
Kind of had an interesting thing. Sorry to cut you off.
Back to your corner, Omar.
Back to the no homework zone.
I read one issue now. I did what you guys needed me to do. I read one issue of Atomic Robo. And kind of going back to what you were saying about kind of issues in comic books and how the whole structure is Spawn, Seth MacFarlane, or Seth MacFarlane.
Spawn would be very different.
Dude, Spawn would be amazing if Seth MacFarlane did.
Todd McFarlane, oh my goodness, is he said something really interesting, is that he'll never renumber Spawn because DC and Marvel are always renumbering things, trying to get a new #1 out there because that's how the comic market works. But he said he wants a comic book to be valued by the number of issues that have come out consecutively for that series. So he wants to do that. So I thought that was a really interesting concept. So for some people, every new Spawn issue is going to be somebody's first comic book. So I think that's a really cool concept and something that really should be done more in comics.
What do you mean, renumbering or
no,
or continuing long runs?
Long runs. I feel like that's something that hasn't been done.
Yeah, that is. That's true.
Well, there are two sides to the coin, of course. Like, I think, I work at a comic shop here in San Francisco, and one of the things that I think is great, particularly about Hawkeye, was that at least at the beginning, Matt Fraction structured it in such a way that each issue is, or maybe even at most like 2 issues, were at least for the first half of the series, were smaller stories that you could literally just give to somebody who walked in the shop and be like, hey, just read this. You don't need to know anything else about it. This is just what Hawkeye does in his off time when he's not being an Avenger. And it was like, people loved it, and it was a great thing to give to anybody, really. And I think that's one of the strengths of Atomic Robo, especially if we decide that it actually is an all ages book. And I don't think there are enough comics like that. I mean, I can't really think of anything that's structured in the same way that's coming out right now. Everything is sort of more long form, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's difficult to do that, to make these singular stories that are entertaining month in, month out, that still sort of paint a broader picture that makes it worth reading the whole thing. It's a very hard line to walk, but I think it's something that's...
I've tried to do that in some stuff I've written, and it really is tough because sometimes you realize, I tried to do it part of the time in Gambit, but they were actually pressuring me to make the first storyline more of an arc to kind of make people keep coming back. We kind of moved a little bit away from that. And
I felt stronger for it, to be honest. When you would do the individual Gambit jaunts, that's when it really clicked for me.
You have consequence carry forward, but I'm a big believer in, if someone paid $3, $4 for this issue, I want them to feel like that transaction, they got a piece of entertainment, not like I showed them, excerpts from my movie or something.
Yeah.
We did a thing, and if they're going to sit down to read it, I want them to feel like I told them a story. But it is a tricky balance, because sometimes you realize, like, oh crap, the story I am trying to tell, to do it right, it doesn't fit in just 22 pages. And other times you're like, oh, this works as a part of a story, but if I have to make it the whole issue, like, I'm padding, you know what I mean? There's not a lot of, like, sincere density to this. So it's tricky, but you can definitely feel like, in reading this, I think there was only like one issue that there were maybe like 2 cliffhangers out of 6 issues here, and there was maybe only one issue where I felt like the rhythms were a little strange, I think, to adhere to whatever they however they decided they wanted to break up story. But yeah, I think it's a really tricky thing to pull off, but I think it's valuable, especially like you said on a retailer front, and I think especially with, you know, if you're doing like a real deep reference Marvel or DC book where like you're not going to just start reading Legion of Superheroes, you know, number 60 or whatever. I think it is great to have these books that are so welcoming, and that especially if they're the kind of material that a person off the street would try, you know. Like it doesn't make as much sense to do that for like Hickman's New Avengers to suddenly be, because it's based on so much other universe stuff. But Hawkeye on his own, right after Avengers is coming out, is a great book to just be like, oh, you saw that guy in that movie, or like you're curious about the Avengers movie. Here's a super palatable, like, just read this thing, and this is how you can enjoy comics. And I think Robo is kind of trying to be a similar olive branch to the new reader, as well as something fun for people who've been reading for years that just feels fresh and not cynical, and not like a downer that a lot of books are.
Omar, what did you think of that first issue? Now that you're all done with it.
I thought it was really cool. I liked the lightheartedness of it. I really enjoyed the history. Just hearing you guys kind of talk about it and talk me through it has made it a lot more enjoyable, because I feel like I really understand the character and I really understand where it's going and kind of how the overall feel of the story is. So it's really cool to hear it. I feel like I did like a live read in the middle of like all you guys were talking. I really got to learn the concept of it. I thought it was interesting how you know, the first thing what the character really wants is to be an American citizen and get kind of you know, his papers, get everything he can to make him actually be human. So I feel like that's a struggle, that robot struggle, and I think that's an interesting concept. I feel like it's a lot like immigration here. If you know, people are immigrating from different parts of the world, I feel like that kind of touches base on that.
Yeah.
I guess the lead into however it's like immigration.
Your son doesn't agree at all. He's coming to yell at you, Omar.
Yeah, the 1-year-olds, don't talk to me about immigrants.
Well, it's almost bedtime, so we're gonna go through our final thoughts. David, what are your final thoughts on this whole series, and why don't you kind of guide us through it?
I loved it. I think that it is a good book to give to kids, because I think the best book to give to kids are the ones that are, you know, just maybe slightly, I don't want to say too mature, but just like maybe just that extra little bit. Because I know when I was a kid, I didn't want to read books that were for kids or comics that were for kids. I wanted to read the stuff that, like, you know, that sort of challenged me. I didn't realize that that's what I wanted at the time, but, you know, and I think that's what Atomic Robo's strength is that you can give it to a kid, and it will perhaps challenge them a little bit, but I think it's going to lead them to want to read more. The structure of the fact that, you know, the structure of the series, and that it is essentially 1-issue, 2-issue stories within like a broader universe, is great. It's the best way to introduce somebody to comics, especially kids. We actually, as a matter of fact, this is a little story on Free Comic Book Day. We had some of the Atomic Robo books. We gave it to these two little brothers that come into our shop all the time, and they come back. I mean, their interest in comics is now like much deeper, but you know, they kept coming back, and I think that's ideal. That's what like any good introduction to comics should be, and Atomic Robos does that with amazing flying colors, and it's just a sight to behold. It's a work of art.
James, what about you?
I think it's one of the best gateway drugs in comics to get people, you know, hooked. I think it's a super refreshing, non-cynical dose of clever fun. And I think if you're hearing this and you're at all on the fence, which is ridiculous, go to Comixology and get the free comic book day ones. And like any good drug deal, your first taste is free, and I'm sure you'll be hooked. And then go get the rest of them. Yeah, it's great.
It's very all ages. This crack.
Take this drug, little kids. You'll be back.
Yeah, actually, if Brian and Sean were smart, they'd walk down to schools with their iPads open. Hey, want to try a comic book?
Kids, the trench coat, just.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. All right, Omar, what about you? What are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are: after reading one issue of Atomic Robo, go buy Quantum and Woody.
Well played.
You win, and then buy Thaniel.
Yeah, Quantum Woody. I think that's a fantastic gateway drug. It's just so fun and so out there, and yeah, it's a great book. It's just it's one of those books that really gets you laughing out loud, and it's just so wacky and fun, and it's something that really kind of can draw you in and get you sticking there. And it's a fun little buddy cop kind of superhero team up story and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
There's our plug. I don't pay for.
Plug.
Valiant. The check is in. Hopefully the check's in the mail, right? Well, my final thoughts. I mean, I'm glad that everyone enjoyed it. I'm glad that everyone, found all the value in it. It's just loaded with humor and heart, and I think it sums it up perfectly. Omar mentioned it in that first issue, and it doesn't really go into it for the rest of the series, but it doesn't need to because it sums up Atomic Robo perfectly. And it's that in the beginning when they're asking him to do the mission, and he says, "There's really nothing you can offer me," and they say, "Here's citizenship and recognized as a human being," and his eyes just go wide, and then it just cuts to him dropping out of the sky, and it's just so. It shows you what matters to him, and it shows, like I said earlier, he's the most human character in the book, and I just think it's so endearing, and it's so rare to find that in comics nowadays. Just a fun, adventurous, and just a protagonist that you can actually root for, and he's cranky and he's angry and he gets mad at things, but he's just so human, and it's so relatable, even when he's fighting giant ants or mechanical pyramid ran by mummies,
My one thing that I want to inject about what you're saying is I think why that's so rare is that there's this thing where everyone wants their comic book characters to be cool or perceived as cool, and I think a lot of people think sincerity and vulnerability is, I think they think antithetical to cool, and I disagree, but I understand why, the John Wayne, Dirty Harry, Wolverine of it all makes people think otherwise. But yeah, I think that's why. But this is like a book with a real warm-blooded, beating heart and a real light touch of vulnerability that goes a long way to make you care. So
yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, this was fun, guys. I'm glad we all agree that Quantum Woody. Well, we all agree Quantum Woody's awesome. But Atomic Robo. I'm glad we all agree that
Atomic takeaway from tonight.
Quantum Woody. Delinquents. Delinquents #2 out this month. This book is fun. Go pick it up. It's Atomic Robo Volume 1. You can go pick up any volume and enjoy it, though. Mm-hmm. Thank you to Brian Clevinger and Scott Wegener for making this book. Thank you to James Asmus and Omar Spahi for joining us this week. I'm Joe. That's David right there, I think. And
hi.
We'll see you next week, guys. Thanks for watching and listening.